So you may have heard the raging debate between free weight and machine exercise. And while studies have shown that both yield similar results from a hypertrophy standpoint, I think we can agree that for some exercises, one might just feel better than the other. So in this video, I'm going to be comparing free weight versus machine exercises for chest and ranking them on these factors: active range of motion, stability, and comfortability, which is how likely is the exercise to cause discomfort outside of the target muscle being trained for the average individual. And it goes without saying that this video is pretty much my own humble opinion, but getting onto the chest, there are two main movement patterns. There are presses and there are flies. And without further ado, let's begin with presses. Starting with free weight exercise, we have the barbell bench press. This is considered the staple pressing movement, but is it the best? Well, we'll get into that. Now, from a range of motion standpoint, technically you're going to be limited by the bar, since you can't really go any lower than the bar touching your chest. But in practice, this shouldn't really limit your range of motion much unless you're taking a super wide grip. Now, in terms of factor number two being stability, the barbell bench press is actually quite a stable exercise for a free weight movement. As long as you're using a consistent grip, properly stabilizing your shoulder joint, and using proper leg drive on the movement, the barbell bench press should feel pretty stable. But if you want more guidance on how to actually perform the barbell bench press, I recommend checking out this video that I made recently on chest exercises. Now, when we get to the third factor being comfortability, this is where the barbell bench press has a little bit of some flaws. Now, many will consider this exercise pretty comfortable to do. However, some people do complain about shoulder pain on this exercise, especially if they have subpar technique. And admittedly, the learning curve to perform the barbell bench press properly is a little bit higher than other exercises. Like, you're not going to expect a complete beginner to just sit down for the first time, do a set of barbell bench press, and have amazing technique. So with that said, I have to dock some points a little bit when it comes to comfortability because of that higher learning curve. So that is a barbell bench press. But before I move on to the next exercise, I want to announce that Able is having a huge birthday sale up to 60% site-wide. Plus, if you use code PATH at checkout, you'll get an additional 10% off your entire order. So it's technically up to 70% off everything at Able. I personally really like their hoodies as well as their 5 and 7 inch shorts. And of course, these stringers and cutouts you see me pretty much wearing every single short are definitely a highly recommended pick for me. But with that said, let's move on to the next exercise. All right, now move on to the second exercise, and that's going to be a dumbbell bench press. Now, this is going to be my personal favorite variation, and I'll explain why. First off, from a range of motion perspective, you can get, in my opinion, the best range of motion out of any pressing exercise using dumbbells because the movement is isolateral, meaning each hand is responsible for its own weight. But to be a little bit nitpicky, staying on the topic of range of motion, we still aren't getting any resistance going across the body. However, can't really do that with a free weight exercise. Now, when it comes to the second factor being stability, this is where the dumbbell bench press sees a little bit of its weakness because a dumbbell bench press is not going to be as stable as a barbell bench press because, once again, we're doing an isolateral movement that's also free weight. On top of that, the setup with a dumbbell bench press is going to be trickier than with a barbell and probably with pretty much any machine you're going to use. But when it comes to the third factor being comfortability, the dumbbell bench press is going to have an edge because, again, it's an isolateral movement. Each limb is responsible for its own weight, and thus it's going to feel more ergonomic. All right, now moving on to machines. First one we have is a Smith machine barbell bench press. Now, I'm specifically doing incline, but this pretty much goes for flat as well. Starting with the range of motion, the Smith machine press is going to be very similar to a barbell bench press since you're going to be limited by the bar. However, for most individuals, unless you take a really wide grip, once again, you can still get decently lengthened at that bottom position. But when it comes to the second factor being stability, this is where machines really start to outshine free weight. The Smith machine press is going to be more stable than a barbell bench press or a dumbbell bench press because it's on a predetermined track. Thus, with the Smith machine press, you don't really have to worry about balance as long as you have an even grip. But when it comes to the third factor being comfortability, this is where there's a little bit of a give and take. Since the Smith machine press is going to be on a predetermined track, the movement can feel a little bit linear at times for some individuals. On top of that, this is where it becomes extremely important to actually set the bench properly and play around with that positioning in order to actually get a comfortable arm path for you. And this requires a little bit of finesse and experience to do. But with that said, for a machine exercise, the Smith machine press does have a superior range of motion, so it is going to rank pretty highly for me. But let's get on to the next exercise. Now move on to the upright hammer strength press. Now I'm using the incline variation, but this pretty much goes for pretty much any of the variations here. And guys, this is a very special moment in the video because this is the first exercise on the list where we actually have resistance going across the body because of this converging arm path. Meaning, this is the first time we're actually getting resistance in the shortened parts of the range of motion. But tragically, I find that in the more lengthened part of the range of motion, we actually really can't get that good of a stretch on the chest because, well, I run out of range of motion. And overall, considering the fact that the chest does benefit from stretch-mediated hypertrophy, this isn't going to be ideal scenario to be in. In fact, I'd rather have it the other way around where we can actually get a good stretch on the chest, but we don't get resistance in the shortened part of the range of motion rather than the flip scenario in this case. Which is why some people even call this exercise a tricep exercise, because when we also bring in the resistance profile of this exercise, the hardest part isn't going to be in the bottom. The hardest part is actually going to be in the more shortened part of the range of motion near lockout over here. However, when we talk about the second factor being stability, this is where this exercise really shines, because since we're using a plate-loaded machine, we don't have to worry about balance. All we really have to worry about in the setup is pretty much just adjusting our seat height, which ideally for an incline press should give us around this 45 degrees of elbow flare roughly right here. Now, when we move on to the third factor being comfortability, this is a little bit subjective, but I find it hard to be 100% comfortable with training all the way to failure on this exercise. Meaning if I loaded the weight super heavy, and even if I take the time to set up the seat, I find that the arcing motion is a little bit uncomfortable. It's like I'm trying to match the arm path with my body compared to it being the other way around with a free weight exercise. In some cases, it might just be something dumb, like my hand kind of hurts if I press too hard on this and load it up too heavy. So with that said, I had to dock a few points because of that. Now, the last machine press I'm going to be showing for today is going to be a lying version of the hammer strength press. Now, the range of motion is going to be pretty much the same as a regular upright plate-loaded hammer strength press, but the difference here is by lying, we're actually going to be able to get a more ideal resistance profile, meaning it's going to be harder at the bottom, unlike the upright hammer strength press. On top of that, it's going to have pretty much all the same benefits as the upright hammer strength press. It's going to be super stable. You don't really have to worry about balance or anything. It's plate-loaded, so it's super easy. You can stack weight on top. But when it comes to the third factor being comfortability, this is where it gets a little bit subjective. I personally find it hard to be 100% comfortable using a machine press, even if it's a lying one like this version. But for a machine press, it's quite good. It's quite comfortable. You don't really have to worry about balance. It's easy to adjust the bench, unlike the Smith machine press. So in my opinion, this is a better variation compared to the upright version of the hammer strength press. So overall, when it comes to pressing exercises, free weight exercises are going to have a superior range of motion, a more ideal resistance profile, and better comfortability in general, especially when it comes to dumbbells. While machine exercises are in general going to be easier to pick up, offer superior stability, but at the cost of sacrificing range of motion a little bit, especially in the bottom part where you're getting the best stretch on the chest. And if you want my honest opinion, when it comes to pressing exercises, I personally prefer free weight exercises, notably dumbbell bench presses, because of the superior range of motion and comfortability. But that's just my personal preference. Now, if you want more personal guidance on what exercises to do for training chest, workout programming, and overall just more guidance on getting to your specific fitness goals, I highly recommend you apply to my exclusive one-on-one fitness coaching program down in the link in the description. Here are some body transformations. Let's get back to the video. So those were all the pressing movement patterns, but now we're going to be moving on to the second movement pattern, being the fly. And when it comes to free weight, we pretty much only have one option, being the dumbbell fly. Now when it comes to the range of motion of the dumbbell fly, we're pretty much only going to get resistance in the bottom half of the movement, which is why a lot of people call this almost a lengthened partial of an actual chest fly. Now this isn't the worst thing, especially considering that the chest benefits from stretch-mediated hypertrophy, and in general the bottom half of the movement, which is the more lengthened part, is going to be the more important part of any chest exercise. But with that said, ideally we want resistance going all the way through, and ideally converging across the body, but I'll get into that further. And when we consider the second factor being stability, since we're using dumbbells, it's not going to be the most stable movement. But with that said, it's not absolutely the worst since we're laying on a bench. However, I will say when it comes to the third factor being comfortability, this is where you get kind of a wide array of experiences, let's call it. However, I noticed that some people will find it hard not to feel in their biceps, especially if they really try to get a deep stretch down below and strain their elbows a little bit. So with that said, I just don't think the dumbbell fly, to be honest, is the best movement. All right, and now moving on to the machine fly exercises. First one being the cable fly, which when we talk about range of motion, the cable fly is going to have the most superior range of motion of any chest exercise, period. Both in the lengthened position with your chest all the way out here, and the shortened position since we're getting resistance going across the body. Now there are some cons to this exercise, notably when it comes to the second factor being stability. The cable fly is just not going to be as stable as, let's say, like a dumbbell fly where you're laying on your back and supported by a bench. or let's say a machine pec deck fly where you're also seated. And then when it comes to the third factor being comfortability, this exercise is also pretty good because, again, we're doing an isolateral movement, meaning each limb is responsible for its own weight, and in general, isolateral movements that are less stable tend to be more comfortable from an ergonomic standpoint. But to be a little bit nitpicky, this exercise is going to have a higher core stability demand, which I guess you can kind of lump that into comfortability / stability. It's kind of in both realms. All right, and move on to the last machine exercise on the list when it comes to flies, and that is going to be the machine pec deck fly. Now, this exercise is going to have an excellent range of motion similar to that with cables, but when it comes to the second factor being stability, this is where this exercise truly shines, because the pec deck fly, in my opinion, is going to be the most stable fly variation that you can do out there. However, I'm not just going to be glazing the exercise, because when it comes to the third factor being comfortability, this is where it's a little bit subjectivity, but I find that the pec deck fly generally is going to give me more comfortability problems compared to the cable fly. Now, I'm not saying that this exercise can't feel super buttery smooth and you can't do this exercise without getting elbow pain or something like that. All I'm saying is that I get a lot more people complaining about elbow pain and whatnot on a pec deck fly compared to the other fly variations. And usually the problem comes down to your arm path, but I feel like these are issues you don't really have with the cable fly, and this exercise just has a little bit higher of a learning curve to do it properly without getting elbow pain. Now, overall, when it comes to fly variations, I think the verdict is pretty clear. Machines are far superior to free weight variations of flies, especially when you consider the goal of programming the fly in the first place, which in my opinion is working the extremes of the range of motion of the chest, meaning you want to be able to get good resistance in the more lengthened part of the chest and actually get your arm all the way out here. But that's not it. You also want to be able to have resistance going across the chest so you can train the chest in this more shortened part of the range of motion. And that's why I mean you're training the extremes of the range of motion. And if you want my personal preference on the best fly variation when it comes to machines, I'll have to give it to the pec deck fly. Let's move on. So overall, when it comes to free weight versus machine chest exercises, in my opinion, free weight exercises edges out machine exercises when it comes to chest presses, but machine exercises sweeps free weight exercises when it comes to fly exercises. So with that said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope you guys got some value from this, and leave a like if you did. Hit subscribe if you want to level up your physique, and don't forget to hit the bell notification button to get these videos as they come out. And I'll see you on the next one. Peace.